Excellent. I know that this is going to seem real basic. The idea of hanging an artwork seems like pretty straightforward, but it may be challenging in a gallery space more so than in your home. You know, in your home, you're just hanging, one piece on a wall. You can just kind of guess the height, guess the location. It's all going to look good, just fine. Not a whole lot of movement that's going to happen around that piece. But if you're hanging in a gallery, everything has to be aligned to a center line, or if they're particular, doing a salon style, someone's going to have to really work out the exact location of each piece and how it's hung. It has to be in the exact same spot every time and stay level the entire exhibition. So that increases the challenge just a little bit. So we're going to go over 2 different ways to hang this one piece based on this having an aluminum frame, plexiglass on the front, and we're going to be hanging it with this orientation. Right? So notice on the back of this piece that it has wire. Right? With aluminum frames, first thing we want to make sure is that all the hardware is secure. We want to make sure that the corners are tight and that whatever hanging hardware is the wires attached to is also tight. It's just a screwdriver that tightens any of these. Usually a Phillips head, some of the older styles still have the flat screwdriver head, but make sure tighten them up just a little bit. If you start to see gaps, you don't want to trust that aluminum is going to hold or that corner is going to hold. Make sure they're tight. Okay? In most gallery spaces, they will choose a center height, somewhere between 56 inches and 60 inches off the floor. They're going to determine for the exhibit what height is right for that show, and then all the pieces will be hung using that same center line. In my space, in this particular space we're in today, I'm using a 58-inch center height. It works well for, say, a 10-foot wall. If you go real high walls, like 14 feet, you might need to raise that up to 59 or 60 inches. If you have 8-foot walls, height-wise, you want to lower that down just a little bit, right? The average height in a gallery has been increasing over time as people grow taller. What that center height is to get that work on eye line for the most people, right? So, in order to get all the pieces at center line, we need to know where the center of our piece is, right? So quick measurement will show us that this particular frame is 28 inches tall. Simply divide that, right? We're going to get 14 inches from center, or 14 inches down would be our center mark in our framed piece. We also need to know, right, once we know the center, how far above the center line are our hanging mechanisms going to be to make sure that this piece is hanging at the center. With wire, a lot of times if you're just hanging this at home, you'll see people put one hanging mechanism right here in the center, right? That will hold the piece up on the wall, but it's real easy for it to get unlevel, rocking on that one point, right? And if anything ever fails on that hanging mechanism, the whole piece is going to crash down to the ground, right? I would always recommend using at least 2 hanging mechanisms in the wall for any piece that you're trying to hang. So we're going to use these little hooks or florets today to hang this wire, right? And in order to figure out how far from the top or how far from that center line I need to put those, I'm going to use a level to hook underneath this wire and pull it real tight so that when it's hanging, we would be able to lift it up with this level, right? And we can actually mark on our piece where the wire is touching the level. Okay. Once I've made those marks, I can measure down from the top of my thing, and this is reading 5 3/4 inches down. So I'm going to be hanging my pieces on the wall, or my little hanging mechanisms, to line up with this mark right here. Right? And I know a lot of art students are a little math phobic, right? And so I don't expect you to have to divide fractions in your head, right? Let the tape measure do the work, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second, right? But on the work, I've marked so that we know we're going to go from our center line, we're going to go 14 inches up, 5 3/4 inches down, and then I'm going to make a mark, and I'm going to transfer those marks 12 inches out on either side, because my level here is 24-inch level, right? So I know my marks here are 24 inches apart. If I have my 2 hanging mechanisms there, it's going to line up exactly where my piece is. Alternatively, we could hang this off the frame itself. If the frame is nice and tight, we can use this top bar as a hanging mechanism, right? It happens that that top bar on most aluminum frames is the exact same size as a number 6 sheetrock screw, right? That sheetrock screw will fit right inside that rail. So now we've made our measurements, we've marked them on our piece so we know exactly how far our hanging mechanisms need to be apart, right? But now we're going to decide where on the wall we want to place that. And in this particular case, I got a kind of a short wall, and I want to make sure that it's centered in that wall and that the center of the piece is 58 inches off the ground. So the first measurement I can make is, let's just kind of guess where the center of the wall is and make a mark at 58 inches. So ideally my height is going to be right there, the very center of the piece. Now, in order to find the center of the wall, I could measure this and say 53 1/4 and try and guess what the center is and do all the math in my head. That seems way too hard to me, right? So what I'm going to do is, knowing that this is it's almost 54 inches from corner to corner, I'm going to take my measurement and say 28 inches and make a mark from this one at 28, and then I'm going to switch over to this side, line my 28 up, make a mark at 28. Now I can come back in and find, now this is 3 1/2. Way easier to do the math of what's 3 1/2 than what's 54 1/4, right? So 3 1/2, I'm going to go 1 3/4 right there. That's my goal. I want the center of my work to be in the center of that right there, okay? And now, since I measured before, I know that the piece, the top of it is going to be 14 inches off the top of that, but my hanging mechanism is going to be 5 3/4 inches down from the top. So I'm going to place my tape measure at 14, right in my center mark. I'm going to come down 5 3/4 inches, make a mark, right? Normally I'd be doing this with a pencil, not a Sharpie on gallery wall. Please don't ever do that, right? Now I have that mark. I'm going to transfer my center using my level. All right, so I want to make sure the bubble of the level on a plumb, right? This is called plumb, not level, when it's going up and down. So I want to make sure that that bubble is right there in the center of those two lines. Once I have that, I'm going to transfer that mark up. That's the center. Now I'm going to find the center of my level, which is 24 inches wide. Once I've found that level mark, make sure my bubble is back there in the center. I make a mark out here, a mark out here at the edge. So now I have location for my two hanging mechanisms that are 24 inches apart and 5 3/4 inches down from where the top of the piece is. I'm using the fewest nails, the smallest nail possible on these single florets. All right, so there's just these two little tiny little nails. Each one of these hanging mechanisms alone is capable of holding 20 pounds with just that single nail. So now I've doubled that. I can hang 40 pounds off this one piece. I cannot handle 40 pounds with one hand as easily, right? So this is about a 5-pound piece. I'm going to reach back. I'm going to attach the wire onto the floret one side. I'm going to pull it towards me, hanging the other wire, just feeling where that is. Hang that on the wire. So now I've got my wire hanging on both. I place my level across the top, make sure that bubble is right there in the center. And now the exact center of my piece is now in the center of the wall at 58. So alternatively, if we didn't want to use the wire, and in most cases I would avoid using wire, it's not the most reliable, it stretches, there's other things that can happen with the wire, so I would want to use something really firm like the top of the rail to hang the photograph or the print. Especially if you're trying to hang, say, like 10 pieces all in a row where people can see down the line, you don't want any kind of variation in that, and wire allows for variation, right? So we're going to hang this now using the top rail as the hanging mechanism and screws. Be very simple. We're going to use sort of the same technique, but we're only going to come down 1/8 of an inch because we don't have much material there, right? And we're able to put our hanging mechanisms a little wider out because we want to go as close to the corner as we can with those screws to make it as level as possible, right? But we'll leave a little bit of gap so that we can move the piece side to side if we need to make up for 1 inch or 2 one way or the other, right? So again, our goal is 58 inches on center. So we come up, mark our 58. We've got that center mark. We go up 14 from there. And then we're going to come down just 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to switch over to my level. Come up. Make sure that that is plumb. And now this time I'm going to go out 15 inches to either side. My total frame is 36 inches wide. So I can go out easily 30 inches and still leave myself a little space to move the piece if I need to adjust it. So now I have my 2 marks. Using simple sheetrock screws. They're coarse, number 6 sheetrock screws. 1 5/8 inches, plenty of length. Doesn't need to be a 3-inch sheetrock screw to go into sheetrock. Most galleries have 3/4 inch plywood behind them. Even if it doesn't, this would be plenty of strength to hold up this particular piece. I don't want to drive them all the way in. I want to leave myself the head of the screw and maybe just a finger depth off. So now I'm going to take our piece, I'm going to tilt it up. I'm going to hook the screws in that top rail. And now I can move that side to side just a little bit, but it's not going to come off the wall. So I can center it or move it if I have to adjust from side to side.